The Zerkai had never known fear. From the moment they emerged from their war cradles, they were conditioned to believe in their own supremacy. Towering over most species, clad in biometallic armor that adapted to incoming fire, and wielding weapons capable of liquefying enemies in an instant, they had carved a path of conquest across the stars. Earth was meant to be another tally on their ever-growing list of subjugated worlds. Their analysts had studied the human species, noting their technological backwardness, their divided nations, and their apparent lack of interstellar capabilities. The humans, they concluded, were an amusing anomaly, primitive creatures who still relied on ballistic weapons, combustion engines, and outdated military doctrines. Conquest would be swift, efficient, and absolute. General Vakayar stood at the command deck of the Wraith of Dominance, watching as his soldiers deployed across the planet. The capital cities fell first. Plasma bombardments melted steel and stone, leveling military strongholds before resistance could organize. Major power grids were systematically disabled, communications silenced, and orbital superiority established within hours. As predicted, Earth's conventional forces proved pathetically inadequate against the Zerkai's overwhelming firepower. Armored divisions were reduced to molten slag before they could reach enemy lines. Fighter jets, moving at a fraction of the speed of the Zerkai interceptors, were swatted from the sky like insects. It was the kind of war the Zerkai had mastered. Until the first soldier died. It happened near the ruins of a human military installation. A squad had been patrolling the outskirts, sweeping for pockets of resistance. Their armor rendered them impervious to small arms fire, and their motion scanners were tuned to detect movement before shot could ever be fired. Yet, without warning, one of their warriors collapsed. A hole no larger than a finger was punched cleanly through the soldier's helmet, piercing the cerebral core beneath. There had been no energy signature, no sonic displacement, nothing to indicate where the shot had come from. A second warrior fell moments later. This time, the projectile struck the soldier's throat, bypassing the reinforced plating. He collapsed, clutching at the wound, his dark blue blood spilling into the earth. The squad, well-trained and disciplined, immediately activated their defensive measures, deploying energy barriers and scrambling their drones. But the drones detected nothing, no heat signatures, no electronic pulses, no signs of an enemy force. Panic set in. The remaining warriors huddled behind their shields, scanning their surroundings with enhanced vision. The environment around them was eerily quiet. Asterisk, asterisk, too quiet, asterisk, asterisk. Then another shot rang out. One of their commanders, a seasoned veteran of 100 planetary campaigns, fell lifelessly onto the dirt, a hole carved between his eyes. By the time reinforcements arrived, only 2 soldiers remained from the original squad. They had survived, not by fighting, but by cowering. Vakayar studied the footage from the recovered helmet cams with a deepening sense of unease. The humans had no cloaking technology, they had no energy weapons capable of bypassing shields, and yet the evidence was undeniable. The shots had come from extreme distances, so far that even the Zerkai's enhanced vision had failed to detect the attacker. This was not the war he had anticipated. Across multiple fronts, similar reports surfaced. Zerkai squads disappeared in rural regions, their bodies later recovered with precise, single-shot kills. Officers executed with surgical accuracy. Panic spread among the lower ranks as whispers of an invisible predator circulated through the troops. The once confident warriors now dreaded open spaces. A distress signal came from Sector 12, deep in the Appalachian terrain. A company of 50 Zerkai had been assigned to secure a nearby valley, eliminating any human holdouts. They had been given armored personnel carriers, aerial reconnaissance, and advanced sensory equipment. They had vanished within an hour. The retrieval teams found only bodies, no signs of a firefight. No weapons discharged on the human side. Just 50 lifeless corpses, each felled by a single, untraceable shot. The humans were hunting them. Vakayar convened with his war council, their expressions betraying their own growing discomfort. What manner of weapon could accomplish this? One of his lieutenants asked, his mandibles twitching. The intelligence officers scrambled to explain, offering theories of electromagnetic disruptions, projectile accelerators, and battlefield anomalies. But none of their data supported such claims. It was then that a human transmission was intercepted. The message was brief, a simple broadcast that repeated in a loop. A deep, measured voice. "You're in our backyard now?" Vakayar listened, his claws tightening against the console. This was no resistance army. No desperate last stand. This was something else. The Zerkai had spent centuries perfecting warfare, analyzing battle formations, adapting to enemy strategies, mastering every technological edge the galaxy had to offer. But humans? Humans didn't fight wars the way other species did. They hunted. Vakayar had never encountered an enemy like this. The humans were not engaging in battle. They were waging psychological warfare. Every step forward felt like walking into an unseen trap, every moment of silence a prelude to another casualty. The warriors of the Zerkai, bred for close-quarters combat and shock assaults, now hesitated to leave cover. Their superior armor and energy weapons meant nothing against an enemy they could not see. The reports were consistent and chilling. Patrols went missing without a trace. Outposts were found abandoned, the only sign of their fate being bodies marked by precise, single-shot wounds. Even their advanced sensor drones struggled to detect movement before it was too late. It defied all known military logic. Enemies who lacked interstellar travel should not possess tactics so refined, so efficient. And yet the proof was undeniable. Humanity was not fighting for survival. It was hunting them. A high-ranking Zerkai officer, Commander Zhervek, was the first to admit what the others refused to say aloud. "We have underestimated them," he growled, his deep-set eyes scanning through the footage from yet another lost squad. The playback showed nothing but empty terrain before the transmission cut to static, the final recorded sound being the faint, distant crack of a rifle. Vakayar felt the weight of the truth settling upon him. The Zerkai had conquered species with fleets that dwarfed humanity's, had crushed civilizations with war doctrines far more advanced. And yet, in these dense forests, in these ruined cities and rolling fields, they were not the apex predators. They were prey. The humans were using ancient weapons, tools of war that should have been obsolete against energy shielding. Their projectiles had no energy signature, no plasma residue, no detectable emissions. Yet they struck with terrifying precision, slipping past reinforced armor and hitting vital areas with an accuracy that defied probability. The warriors of the Zerkai were elite soldiers, but they were accustomed to overwhelming force, to battles where their sheer presence was enough to break an enemy's will. They had never encountered an opponent that could remain unseen, unheard, until the moment a killing blow was struck. Desperation crept into their strategy. The High Command issued new protocols. Soldiers were to move in tightly packed formations, their shields overlapping to create protective barriers. Drones were deployed in greater numbers, scanning every inch of terrain with thermal imaging. Armored walkers, impervious to most forms of infantry fire, patrolled the most contested zones. It did not matter. The humans adapted. Snipers ignored body shots, aiming for throats, eyes, and the exposed joints between plates of armor. Others waited for fatigue to set in, striking when soldiers dropped their guard for even a moment. Walkers, thought to be untouchable, became targets for well-placed explosives that ruptured their joints or shattered their optics. The fear spread like a sickness. Warriors who had never known doubt before now hesitated before stepping into the open. Squads assigned to recon duty refused their missions, citing phantom gunfire in the distance. Some spoke in hushed voices about the invisible demons that haunted the battlefields. They started calling the unseen enemy long shadows, a name whispered with the same reverence that lesser species used when speaking of gods. Vakar had fought in countless campaigns, had led assaults on worlds teeming with resistance. But there was no glory in this fight, no honor in these kills. There was only the creeping, inevitable realization that the Zerkai were losing. A distress beacon flickered from an outpost deep within the mountains. A full platoon had been stationed there, 80 soldiers, equipped with auto-sentries and reinforced barriers. Vakar had personally reviewed its defenses. It should have been impenetrable. When his forces arrived, they found the perimeter intact. No breaches, no signs of struggle. And yet, not a single warrior remained. The Watchtower's security feed revealed the truth. The humans had not stormed the outpost in a grand assault. There had been no battle, no prolonged firefight. There had been one man, one marksman, concealed in the cliffs, had picked off the sentries one by one. The others had panicked, huddling in cover, afraid to move. As night fell, more soldiers died, their bodies dropping without a sound. The survivors abandoned their posts, running into the darkness in search of safety. None had made it out. One man, Vakar, clenched his claws into a fist, his frustration boiling into something darker. This was not war. This was annihilation by inches. The battle reports no longer contained strategic recommendations, only warnings. Avoid high ground. Do not expose yourself in open terrain. Move only under cover, ***, the mighty Zerkai, who had once stormed planets without hesitation, were now hiding from ghosts. The human snipers had become something far worse than an enemy. They had become the monster that the monsters feared. The silence was worse than the gunfire. Vakar stood at the heart of the war council, his claws tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm against the console. The chamber was filled with officers, but none spoke. Not anymore. The bravado that had once defined them, the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat, had withered beneath the weight of the truth. The battle for Earth was not a battle at all. It was an extermination. They had tried everything. Orbital bombardments had turned forests to ash. Yet the snipers remained, thermal scanners had searched for heat signatures. Yet the marksmen left no trace. Drones had mapped every ridge and valley. Yet the moment a warrior stepped outside cover, he fell with a hole punched through his skull. There was no pattern, no logic that could be exploited. Only death, delivered from an unseen hand. Vakar had underestimated them. The humans did not need fleets. They did not need armies. They needed only time. Time to hide. Time to wait. Time to remind the universe that it was not the Zerkai who were the predators here. Another report came in. 70 more warriors dead, not in a battle, not in a siege. Just gone, picked off, one by one. Some bodies had been left where they fell. Others had disappeared entirely, dragged into the wilderness by unseen hands. Warriors who should have died instantly had been left just alive enough to crawl back to their lines, whispering warnings with their last breaths. Fear had become a sickness among the ranks. It started in the lowest units, those stationed in the outer territories, where the forest stretched for miles, and the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Soon even the elite warriors, the ones who had never known fear, began to feel it, the weight of an enemy they could not see. The certainty that the next step, the next breath, the next moment would be their last. Vakar had fought enough wars to know the signs. The battle was already lost. His warriors no longer spoke of conquest. They no longer spoke of victory. They spoke of escape. He had ignored their pleas for withdrawal at first. It was unthinkable. The Zerkai did not retreat. No species had ever forced them to do so. Even in the rare moments when an invasion had been costly, the solution had always been simple. Overwhelm, annihilate, erase, But this time, overwhelming force meant nothing. Their superior numbers had given them no advantage. Their technology had provided no safety. The war had become a war of patience, and patience was something the humans had in infinite supply. There was a final assault planned, a last attempt to reclaim control, to push back the enemy that had already gutted them. Every remaining unit would converge, sweeping through the contested territories in a brutal, coordinated offensive. The plan was desperate, reckless, and doomed. Still it was carried out. Thousands of Sci-Fi warriors advanced into the ruined valleys, their formations tight, their scanners tuned to their highest sensitivity. They moved slowly, carefully, eyes scanning every ridgeline, every shadow, every inch of terrain that could conceal a threat. Nothing. The silence stretched for miles. Then, from somewhere unseen, the first shot rang out. A single warrior fell. Then another. Then another. The ranks tightened, shields overlapping, scanning equipment working at full capacity. Another shot. Another body dropped. Panic spread, but the warriors pressed forward, clinging to the last vestiges of discipline. They had to reach the enemy, they had to find where the humans were hiding. Then the voices started. The humans had hacked the communication channels, speaking directly into their helmets, a low, measured voice. Steady. Unhurried. You should have stayed in the stars. Another shot. You are not hunters here. A scream. This world belongs to the patient. A garbled transmission cut short. You were dead the moment you landed. The Sci-Fi broke. The formation collapsed. Warriors abandoned their positions, scattering into the wilderness in a frantic attempt to run from an enemy they could not see. Some threw down their weapons entirely, retreating in blind terror. Others never got the chance. Within an hour, the offensive force was gone. There was no final stand. No last clash of titans. Only the steady, relentless elimination of an army that had never known defeat. By nightfall, the order was given. The Sci-Fi were leaving Earth. The War Council did not argue. There was no shame in their decision, only the cold, undeniable certainty that staying meant death. They had learned something that no species before them had learned. The humans were not the weak ones. They were not the fragile ones. They were the monsters in the dark. And the Sci-Fi had been foolish enough to step into their hunting grounds.